Hello everybody, I'm John, this is Strategic Investing, and today we are going to do an update on Xtract One Technologies. We have had a busy month, several different contracts announced. My Discord has been definitely growing over the last few weeks especially. I think we're over 400 members in that Discord alone. Subscribers on the YouTube channel are growing. The stock is starting to get a lot of attention. And I think it's warranted. We've had a decent pickup in contract announcements. We've also, got the One Gateway looking like it's really shaping up to be the game changer that we all kind of thought it would be. So just kind of going to go through a few of these contracts here, talk about this analyst note that we've got, the latest one from Ventum Capital. I have the full kind of report here with the price target increase from 80 cents to $1. And then maybe at the end do a little bit of technical analysis for those that are interested. Not necessarily thinking, as I've said before, it's the best way to look at Xtract One right now. But for those of you that are interested, maybe I'll get to that at the end. So let's jump right into it here. First, kind of go through some of these contracts just in the last month. This is Meridian Public Schools. This one was announced almost exactly a month ago, July 17th. And the interesting thing about this one is it is a school buying the Smart Gateway, not the One Gateway. And I think we're going to still see some of these. And this is really because of the dual purpose, if you will, for the Smart Gateway, specifically as it relates to high schools. And this is something that Peter has touched on. And I think, I'm speculating here, that we're going to see this because some districts and states and other areas are talking about, or maybe have even started, requiring screening at high school sporting events. So football games, basketball games, things like that. And the Smart Gateway is really much better suited for that than the One Gateway is. Again, for those of you that are kind of new to this company, new to the stock, the Smart Gateway is really purpose-built for the stadiums, arenas, entertainment centers, things like that. The kind of selling point here is high accuracy, very good down to small knife weapons detection, with a high throughput. Whereas the One Gateway, really the main selling point for the One Gateway, is that it can do things that the Smart Gateway, as well as kind of Xtract One's two major competitors, Evolve with their Evolve Express and Chea with the Chea Open Gate, both of those, as well as the Smart Gateway, will have issues with laptops, binders, steel water bottles, umbrellas, things like that, which the One Gateway, now that they've started selling that just recently, is the only system on the market that will not falsely alert on things like laptops, binders, large water bottles, tablets, especially all of those together in a backpack, which is exactly what, basically everyone at a school, convention center, any sort of corporate setting, any sort of educational setting, basically everybody's going to have those things. And there have been, workarounds, especially obviously Xtract One's competitors with the Open Gate, with the Evolve Express, have still been able to make a decent amount of sales to schools, but they have to do workarounds like adding an X-ray machine as kind of the most recent one to the system as well, so that the backpacks can go through that. The students walk through the regular system, or handing the laptops around the system, holding them over their head. There's ways to get around it, but it adds to the complexity and also, reduces the efficacy and the accuracy of the system. So that's really kind of one of the main advantages Xtract One has right now, and a big catalyst for their business and potentially the stock here, is if they're able to really capitalize that on that, it's a game changer for the market, and they could really do well in schools and other similar markets, right? So that is kind of the difference here, and I think that is the reason also that you possibly will see, especially with high schools, some of these schools continue to buy Smart Gateway, especially if they're kind of, looking more from a budget scenario. They're like, hey, I don't want to have to buy One Gateways for the schools and then Smart Gateways for the sporting events. If I can just, deal with some of the workarounds that I have to do with Smart Gateway for the regular school, then I don't have to buy both systems, and I can just use the same system and wheel it over or carry it over to the sporting events when we have those. So that's kind of what I'm thinking there on that contract. As far as the next one, we have the Global Performing Arts Company. So this was just about a week later, July 24th. This is, there was speculation about Cirque du Soleil. There was another company this could be. I forget the name of the company, but around the one that owns Disney on Ice. Disney on Ice and some of those other ones is actually kind of put on by a separate company other than Disney. But, we don't really know exactly who this could be, but definitely a nice contract here, especially it being a global performing arts company. That means it's obviously, a pretty decent sized company. So potentially looking at some nice value in this contract here as well. The next one, this is, arguably one of the most exciting ones, since it's for a whole district, and we're looking at the size of this, and because it seems to be at least as far as the ones we know of, the largest one gateway contract so far. This is for 48 Xtract One gateways. One of the few contracts that we actually get some numbers in here, and that's huge. And we actually have also some details on that contract as well. I don't have those pulled up, but we basically know this is, I think, just over a $7 million Canadian contract. Remember, for all of us here, the numbers that we see from Xtract One are in Canadian dollars because it is a Canadian company. So even though the contract, I think if we look at the numbers, is in like 5.4, somewhere around that US, 5 point something million dollars US, what we're going to see on the financials for Xtract One is more around $7 million, because we have to take into account that conversion there to Canadian dollars. So that kind of helps us out there, makes it a little bit bigger of a contract in Canadian dollars. So obviously great to see an entire district going with the one gateway. I think we're just going to see more and more of these, and we're going to start to get these larger contracts where we get an entire district as opposed to, a school here or a school there or a couple, small school district. The one gateway is really shaping up to be a huge advantage here for Xtract One. So that is good to see there as well. Last contract that was announced that I want to touch on. This was just right about a week ago. Xtract One announces international growth with a $2.6 million follow-on contract. So if you guys remember a little while ago, the initial contract with this company that has still yet to be named, there's speculations that this is Tokyo, Disney, or potentially some other customers. We don't quite know for sure, but it seems to fit that pretty well. The original contract was 5.1 million US dollars. Again, remember, we got to do the conversion to Canadian here, and this is another 2.6 million US dollars in the expansion of that. So we're looking at just over $3 million actually, if we're talking about Canadian dollars there, right? And again, actually, I take that back. We have one more here. This one wasn't really announced, but we kind of know about this because of some articles and digging. Credit to, as always, some of the members in my Discord server that are doing some great research. And yeah, just another, 500,000 again, US dollars here that we're looking at. And potentially, from what I remember looking at this, they're talking about a second phase with similar size to that as well. So really, you add up, we don't have dollar amounts obviously for these first two contracts, but even just, this 48 gateway as well as this one here, that's about 10 million Canadian dollars right there. Plus we have, potentially another 600 or so thousand Canadian, maybe actually 700,000 Canadian right there. And if they add that second phase, maybe another 700,000. So you're looking at like 1.4 million. And this one could be very well, a couple million there. and potentially another, million or so there. We're really looking at, in the last month, honestly, somewhere around maybe $15 million in new added contract value. Mostly really that they've announced. Morgan is kind of the only one that was not announced, and we know that they don't announce all of their contracts. Many of them require NDAs, especially the sports related ones. We're approaching right now kind of really the or I guess you could say the quarter that we're in right now, again, which is not the quarter we're going to get numbers for. The quarter we're going to get numbers for is Q4, which is May, June, July, right? We're in August right now, and so this kind of tail end of Q4 and beginning of Q1 is really the time when most sports, major sports, at least in the US, are in kind of the off season, right? Because you have really the only sport that is in full swing right now is baseball. But other than that, you've had hockey and basketball, right? The NHL and the NBA that finished up playoffs in June, right? So you have kind of July and now August, September. So kind of start of this first quarter that we're in right now, where the NHL and the NBA are in off season. That's when, we're going to see probably most likely installations there while they're in the off season on those types of arenas. And football is kind of just getting started. Haven't really seen a lot of push into, NFL stadiums, but, hopefully we get some there as well. So really a lot of things looking good, and probably leading to, again, price target raises from analysts here. Now, the interesting thing here, and I can't really wrap my head around what some of the things this analyst is doing in their notes. Obviously, they have a good idea of kind of the opportunity here with Xtract One. That obviously Ventum Capital put a decent amount of money into Xtract One, and I'm sure they've done some research, but it really, if you look at this price target increase, what they're actually saying here is that they have, and this is after the most recent, this is, do they have a date on here? August 14th, right? So this is after basically all of these contracts were announced, right? And obviously, by the way, we have them announcing these investor events coming up here. But even after all of this, what they're actually saying here, the reason that they're increasing their price target, it says we are lowering our discount rate. Let me make this a little bigger so you guys can see this here. We're lowering our discount rate from 13% down to 12%. And for those of you guys that don't know, they're using kind of a discounted cash flow analysis. What they're talking about here as far as raising their price target from 80 cents to $1, actually that's mostly a result of lowering this discount rate from 13 down to 12. And again, for those of you unfamiliar with discounted cash flow analysis, this discount rate is essentially a measure of how much risk you are taking on with the company. The higher the risk that you assign to this investment, then the higher the discount rate. And so, what they're really kind of saying here is all of this new contract, especially this new add-on contract of the $2.6 million US, it's lowering their risk assessment of the business, and so that's why they're lowering this. But what it isn't doing, apparently, unless somehow I'm reading this wrong, if you go actually to their analysis here of the future earnings, they haven't changed this at all. They copied and pasted their last financial analysis from what it seems. And so if we look at the revenue estimates for 2026 and 2027, again, we're in fiscal Q1 right now of 2026. The earnings that we will be getting likely in October. The report there is for Q4 of fiscal 2025 and full year earnings for fiscal 2025, which they haven't changed any estimates for, which kind of makes sense because most of those contracts probably aren't going to actually see much of that revenue until, we get into Q1, Q2 of fiscal 2026. But again, we just got what's probably around $15 million Canadian in contract value just in the last month that they've announced. And it's not, changing what you're looking at for fiscal 2026 for revenue. Unless you're going to make the argument that they already kind of factored in that amount of growth. But if you're booking, that many contracts, a lot of these one gateway contracts are going to be upfront, so you're not recognizing it over 3 years. You're recognizing, a decent chunk of it immediately. I have a hard time believing this number doesn't change, and especially, you're talking about going from 100% growth here. So 15.4 million is their estimate for revenue in the most recent year. Then fiscal 2026, they estimate that basically doubles to 29.8 million. But then you only see, what's that, like 30% growth from fiscal 2026 to 2027? I don't buy that at all. Unless they're saying the business like significantly shifts everything to subscription model and does something kind of like Evolve did with licensing rights and, a weird workaround to do that because they want to still offer upfront contracts. This to me doesn't make sense. And then they're still using EBITDA in their comparison to other companies, which doesn't make sense if, they were to actually do the research and understand the cost, which I'm sure they do. But for a company that uses depreciation as a large part of their cost of revenue, you can't take their earnings before cost of revenue to compare to other companies that don't do that. That just doesn't make sense. It gives Xtract kind of an unfair advantage, which is maybe what they're trying to do, but to me, a lot of this financial analysis, I would be really curious to talk to this analyst. I've tried to contact them on LinkedIn through their email and whatever methods I can find. But I'd love to kind of pick their brain and see really what they're thinking when they kind of go through all of those numbers there. That would be really interesting. I think it would be a nice video to get on the channel. But anyway, we'll see what's going on there. I think $1 is a low price target here for Xtract One, especially if they're able to continue to execute as they've been doing with the one gateway. We could very well see much more than that if this really is like a 1 year price target, Anyway, so that's kind of, mainly my thoughts on that. I will quickly, just because this video is getting a little long, go through some of the technical analysis here. Basically, to make the long story short, we're kind of seeing a little bit of a double, if you will, triple top. Obviously, we have, right here, and here hitting this, and this is, XTRAF for everybody in the US at the 39 cent, 40 cent level. And so that is kind of the main resistance point at the moment. You also have the kind of 32, 33 cent level as the horizontal resistance. So it'll be interesting to see if we can kind of maintain that from a technical perspective. And you're starting to see kind of this leveling off where we're breaking off from this main trend line we've been following for a while into a more shallow trend line, which usually is, from a technical perspective, a very good sign where we see this more rounded bottom and starting into an uptrend here. Similar for the Canadian, for those of you looking at the Canadian stock, that resistance would be at the 56 cent level and the support at the 44 cent level that we're looking to maintain here. Again, I don't think that technical analysis is really a great way to look at Xtract One right now. I think it's much more of a growth story with the financials and with the actual fundamentals of the company. But for anybody interested in that, that's kind of a really basic level, because as I said before, this video is kind of getting a little long right now. I will be making, hopefully very soon, a video on how kind of we're looking at profitability here, especially with all these new contracts and what we need to see there. Some videos about Evolve and stuff in relation to kind of the healthcare opportunity with Xtract 1 and Evolve, and a couple of other things. So hopefully you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions, as always, leave those down in the comments below. And other than that, I will see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day.